could regulate my breathing. Tell me something to do to change my breathing. Deeper. Give me something else. Faster. For a cough. Slower. Talking regulates your breathing. So the medulla just keeps you alive to breathe. The pons tells you what your breathing should be doing. Faster, slower, deeper, shallow. Hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. Right? That's a regulatory event. So the pons is a higher function. Breathing is easy. Telling me what to do to breathe is a little harder. So I went from simple to more complex. On the third term, we'll learn about the specifics. Makes sense on our brainstem. So pons, medulla oblongata. So where are we now? We went from brainstem. We are now here. What do we call that area above the brainstem? Right here. You're going to say midbrain. We're going to put it over here. Part 2. Okay, if you're reading Saladin, he doesn't like this word. It's not big enough. So he hits you with this word. Mesencephalon. I don't care which word you use. I'm happy with midbrain. By the way, medical terminology people, what does cephalon mean? Brain or head, what does meson mean? Midbrain, right? Same word, right? So I don't care which one you use. But midbrain, mesencephalon, they mean the same part. They're this part above the stem, right here. So can you tell me what's in there? 3 things. Oh, you butchered it, but that's okay. The corpora quadrigemina. Leave something else in there.
Cerebral aqueduct.
The cerebral aqueduct. Name the third thing in there. This, cerebral peduncle. You all know what our peduncles are, right? That crazy uncle. All right. So we have the corpora quadrigemina, the cerebral aqueduct, and the peduncles are located in that middle zone. Let's go through each one. Corpora quadrigemina. That does your eye and ear reflexes. What you got to see here? Eye and ear reflexes. So we're going to stop there. Remind me from last term. What's a reflex? It's on your final. I can change your grade if you don't know. Involuntary. What? An involuntary what?
Movement.
Response or reaction to a stimulus, right? Who modulates or who controls most reflexes? Part of your body. Usually the spinal cord, right? Goes in my spine out. But you can have reflexes in the brain because they're still involuntary. They're still a response to a stimulus that you have no control over. Even though it's brainy, it's not a conscious thing. So tell me something your eye does involuntarily. Blinking when a bug hits it, right? You don't think about that. What else do your eyes do without you thinking about it? Tears, dilate and constrict. Those are all eye reflexes controlled by the corpora quadrigemina. Give me an ear reflex. Any day now. Name something your ears do without you being aware of it. Yeah, I know that. You're doing it. Hear a loud sound. What's the next thing you notice about your ears?
The rings.
The ringing. It sounds muffled. That's an ear reflex trying to clamp down the tympanic membrane. When you hear your name, you turn your head automatically, right? Or babies turn to loud sounds. Babies will do it at birth. They'll turn their head to a sound. That's an ear reflex. You're not consciously able to control that. Right? So those are eye and ear reflexes. That's a harder thing to do than just keep you alive. I have to listen and turn. By the way, anyone know what quadri means?
4.
How many eyes do you have?
2.
How many ears do you have?
2.
4. Each part of it controls one of your eyes and one of your ears. So there's 4 bumps to make 4 things. That's doing eye and ear reflexes. How about a cerebral aqueduct? What do aqueducts do?
Move water.
Move fluid. So this is to move fluid or to drain fluid. What fluid would I find in a brain? CSF, as we talked about last term, the ependymal cells. So the cerebral aqueduct is a drain between the middle of the brain, which is here, we'll talk about in a little bit, and going down. So that's the aqueduct. It's draining fluid out of your brain. How about a peduncle? Okay, will someone tell me what a peduncle does?
Structurally, like connecting?
Very good. It's basically a bunch of tracts. From last term, what was a tract?
Nerve bundle.
Nerve bundles, nerve fibers, conduits. passageways. So tracts are peduncles, simply large tracts of wiring between the low brain to the high brain again. It's simply connecting the brain together. Right? Let me show you a peduncle in action. I'm sure you care. This will not be anatomically correct, but it will show you the idea behind the peduncle. Right? Here is my weird-looking brain. It's not. There it is. Okay, we're going to start down here. Here's my spinal cord. Stuff is coming up my spine. I'm feeling something. Goes to your medulla. Medulla just keeps you alive and crosses the sides. Goes to my pons. My pons bridges, connects it up. Right here, notice what it's doing is the peduncle is carrying the information higher up into the brain. So simply carrying more information vertically into the brain. So the peduncle and the pons are similar. They're carrying information from the lower part to the higher part. Make sense? That's a peduncle. So now where are we going to end up? After we go up our peduncle, that sounded wrong in some way. We're going to take a little turn. The wrong button. We're going to take a little turn to the rear here. We're going to go to the back of the brain for a minute. So we came from stem to mesencephalon. We're going to go here. What is that there? That's the cerebellum. Let's put that over here. Number 3.
So you do not consider the midbrain part of the brainstem?
No.
Okay.
Some people do. I didn't, and I think Saladin doesn't. So you'll hear people, so that's one weird thing with the word. You'll see people throw the peduncles with the brainstem. You'll see people put the quadrigemina with the epithalamic. So it's kind of wherever you decide to put it. For this class, we're going to put mesencephalon. So we're going to do our cerebellum, the back part of the brain. That back lumpy thing. Someone tell me what a cerebellum does.
Balance.
Balance. Coordination. Motor control. Motor fine-tuning, motor quality control. So the way you're going to remember this is the belle of the ball likes to dance. She keeps her balance. She's coordinated. She has motor control because she's a beautiful girl. Belle of the ball. Right? So what am I doing right now that requires my cerebellum?
Standing.
I'm standing, or I'm not falling over. So if I were to tip, my cerebellum would have to compensate for that. Last term you learned about the spinocerebellar tract. That was to control or to sense what? On your final question 5C. Balance, right. So it went to the cerebellum because the cerebellum was for balance. So that was a balance tract, right? So those tracts you learned last term. But the cerebellum is mostly for balance, coordination, major gross limb position. Right? Again, a basic function. So life support, got our midbrain, we have our cerebellum. Now we're going to go here. What is that place called? Yes and no. Yes, that is the thalamus, but we're going to make it a bigger word. Diencephalon. Our next group of things. Which literally means second brain. Okay, the trick for lab and for class, everything in the diencephalon contains the word thalamus in it. So if you see the word thalamus, you know it's in the middle of the brain, the diencephalon. So there are 3 things in the diencephalon. One of them is called the plain old thalamus. Let's find that. Can someone find the thalamus for me? There, the bullseye in the center. That is my thalamus. If you look, there's places below that and above that. How would I say below the thalamus? Hypothalamus. Literally below your thalamus. But it's thalamus, therefore it's diencephalon. Okay? There's stuff above the thalamus. No. The other word for above. Epithalamus. Because they all say thalamus, they're all in the same part of the brain. So you have thalamus in the center, hypo below, and epi above. Okay, from Psych 101, tell me the job of your thalamus.
Motion.
What is it?
Emotional.
Partially. There's another couple things we're going to talk about first.
Sorting?
What was it? Heard it? Sorting. So we called it the sorter when I was a lad. We called it the switchboard. Since then you know about rotary phones, you now know them as routers. When you hit send on your email, how does it know where to go? The router that's plugged into sends it to the right place. Right? When I was, believe it or not, when I was little, you had to call the operator in SIO to get to Albany. He would actually physically connect the wires on like hee-haw to make it work. That was a switchboard, right? Also called a sorter. So the thalamus' job is to sort the signals. Look where it is. It's at the top of the peduncles. What do peduncles do? Big bunch of wires. So the wires come up, hit my thalamus. My thalamus decides where to go. I'm going to show you that picture one more time. Showing our peduncles. We're going to show the thalamus. Yeah, right here. So on this picture, here again is my peduncle. This circle is the thalamus. And what do you notice those purple lines are doing?
Radiating.
They're radiating, or they're projecting, or they're being sent to different locations. So another way people talk about this, they call it projection. Saladin, you'll hear that in your book. Projection means to send the signal different places. So my brain has to be told which signal goes where. Just like your email or your text has to go to the particular person you're trying to communicate with. So your thalamus acts as a switchboard or a sorting system. Make sense? There's two more things it does from last term. Spinal thalamic tract. What did the spinal thalamic tract convey? Information about two things. One began with P, one began with T.
Temperature.
Pain and
Temperature.
temperature. So in addition to being a sorter, the thalamus senses pain and temperature. What is my body temperature and does that hurt? That's also in part of this thalamic tract, or spinal thalamic tract to the thalamus. So it projects and measures those two. Okay? Hypothalamus. Tell me what its job is on the first day of 231. Homeostasis. Hypothalamus with an H does homeostasis with an H. Give me examples of homeostasis.
Negative feedback.
Negative feedback. Give me one. Give me an example of negative feedback.
You're hot, you sweat.
You're hot, you sweat. You're cold, you shiver, right? Give me some others. Is the only one you know?
Blood pressure.
Blood pressure, pH, right? Thirst, hunger, body sugar, blood pressure, right? Muscle tone, all those things. So anything that's homeostatic is going to be in the hypothalamus. And that also leads to a related thing called your drives. Can someone tell me a drive people have psychologically? You have a drive or a need to what? Eat, because that's homeostasis. If I don't eat, I run out of sugar. What else? Hungry, thirst, sex, right? Those are in here because the body is trying to regulate homeostasis to maintain body sugar, body thirst, hormone levels, all those things are in here. Right? So tell me what epithalamus does. Oh, I have a job. Epithalamus has a couple jobs. One of the jobs is it contains the pineal gland, sometimes called the pineal body. You'll hear both. Can someone tell me what an endocrine gland does? Produces hormones. Does anyone know what hormone the pineal gland makes? You will in week 5. It makes melatonin. So one of the jobs of the epithalamus is to contain the pineal body, which makes melatonin. That's that little bump at the back. Ooh, I forgot to put it up there. Let's go back to our epithalamus. Look at that picture and find the pineal body, pineal gland, which is right here. Can someone find the pineal gland or pineal body for me? Part of epithalamus. That little bump there, that's actually an endocrine gland. So epithalamus is sort of a location, like North Portland. So you can have things in it, like that. There's something else it's for besides making hormones. That also contains a choroid plexus. Let's do a choroid plexus. So what does a choroid plexus do? It makes CSF. So I'm going to write that over here. Choroid. So what was CSF from last term? Cerebrospinal fluid. So does anyone remember what kind of cells, glial cells, are in the choroid plexus from last term? Start with an E. You couldn't pronounce them. Yes, very good. Those glial cells you forgot about. Right? So in the choroid plexus in my epithalamus are ependymal or ependymal cells that make CSF. All right, so let's see if we can find the choroid plexus. Can we find it? Look here. Choroid plexus. That red line at the roof of the epithalamus is the choroid plexus at that location. That's going to make CSF. So we're going to take a detour now. We're going to learn about CSF and how it works around. Species says thou shalt know. So to understand CSF, you have to understand this picture here. What is that showing? Say brain. Okay, what's that blue stuff in the brain there? There, one lone voice in the wilderness. Just read this sign on this.
Ventricle.
Those are ventricles. What is a ventricle? It's a space. So these are spaces, balloons, chambers within the brain. What do you think they're filled with? Take a guess. 3 letters beginning with C.
CSF.
They're full of CSF. So we're going to use the choroid plexi to make CSF in these locations because we're going to fill the brain up with fluid on the inside. Right? You'll see that in lab tomorrow. Right? So another view. Here are my ventricles, my spaces in the brain. Those will be full of fluid. All right, CSF fluid. So let's go visit our choroid plexus again, which is right here. Last term. Remember seeing that? I think you did. I remember showing it to you. Right, so here's my choroid plexus, the thing in, say, the epithalamus. Those are the ependymal cells or ependymal cells, because I can't figure out lights. All right. So if you remember your CSF from last term, we take fluid out of the bloodstream, stuff we want, and basically put it around the brain and spinal cord as CSF because we don't want everything in your blood in there, right? That CSF is plasma without the cells. Make sense? So that's the ependymal cells. That's the choroid plexus where I make the CSF. So what I'm going to do now is show you that in a bigger picture. Right here. That red thing there is the choroid plexus in the epithalamus. But what do you notice here and there?
There's also
See, choroid plexus.
choroid plexus.
So there's more than one. So I'm listing one in the epithalamus because that's where you find it, but there are others. If you look at where they are, they're in each of the spaces. Here's a ventricle with a plexus. Here's a ventricle with a plexus. Here's a ventricle with a plexus. So all the balloons have their own CSF factory in them. They're all like choroid plexus. So we have to write that down over here because BC says, thou shalt understand this diagram, thou shalt. So you're supposed to know this diagram, so take a picture with your phone, of how this stuff is going to flow around. So let's do our steps. So where is CSF made? In the
Choroid plexus.
choroid plexus. Our first step is we're going to make CSF in the choroid plexes. There are 4 of them. So there are 4 choroid plexes, 1 in each ventricle. So how many ventricles do you have?
4.
4, right? So I'm going to take the 4 ventricles, and each one is going to make CSF via a choroid plexus. We're going to follow the arrow. So what we're going to do for step 2 is we're going to start with the choroid plexi in the center here. We're going to start with these. Okay? So we're going to say CSF from the lateral ventricles. Okay, someone tell me where you think the lateral ventricles are. What does lateral mean? The side of your brain. So let's go back to the ventricle picture and look at those ventricles again. So we go back to our ventricle picture. Right here. Someone guess which ones are the lateral ventricles?
C's.
These ones here, the ones on each side. So there's laterals on the side, and there's some in the center. So we're talking about these lateral ventricles, the ones in the side, top of the brain. So we're going to start there. Then they're going to go from the laterals down to this next one called the third. Why do you think they call that one the third? How many laterals are there? 2. What's 1 plus 2 plus 1 is?
3.
3. Okay. So numbering them in order. We don't call them 1 and 2. We call them lateral. But the third one is the third balloon. And there's another one down here called the fourth because they're numbered in order. So you have laterals to third, third to fourth. Make sense? So you get they're laterals, but they're 1 and 2 by the name. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in our lateral ventricles, the top 2. Then we're going to drain on down. So that puts me, which one am I going to be in after the laterals? I'm going to enter what's this one here going to be? The third. So it's going to go from the laterals to the third ventricle, because the laterals count as 1 and 2. So now I'm going to go from the third to where? The aqueduct. Very good. Remember, your mesencephalon is right here, and there's a drain tube there. What was that drain tube called? Cerebral aqueduct. So now I'm going to go from the third to the cerebral aqueduct. I have to go down the tube, and that's a drain tube to drain. I'm going to drain into where? What do you think is the next place after the cerebral aqueduct? The fourth ventricle. So I go from the laterals to the third, third to the fourth. Okay. Let me show you that on the bigger picture. Then we have a little harder part. So laterals to third, third to the aqueduct to the fourth, which is by the cerebellum. Look right here and tell me what's happening after the fourth ventricle. What do you see there? Leaking where?
To the spinal cord.
I have a vote for the spinal cord. That's this arrow.
It's around the
And this one here. So we have a fork in the road. So congratulations for step 5. You have 2 choices for step number 5. So after the fourth ventricle, you're going to send the fluid 2 different places. One is down the spinal cord. Do you remember what part of the spinal cord had a hole in the very center? The central canal. That's why you learned it last term. So some of the fluid's going to go down the central canal of the spinal cord. That's this arrow right here. That's the central canal. You can read the first word here. Of the spinal cord. Can someone tell me where this is? You learned it last term. I say that a lot today. It's a space under the meninges.
epidendral space.
What was it? The subarachnoid space is option 2. Subarachnoid. So some of it leaks down the spinal cord, central canal. Some leaks in the subarachnoid space around the brain, or in the meninges, we could say. And those are both valid spots for step 5. Okay? So I'm going to go and split my CSF, some down the spine, some in the subarachnoid space. Okay, so now what? Well, let's follow the arrows. Going down my spine to my butt. I end up in the subarachnoid space. You follow the arrows in the subarachnoid space, they're all going upwards, and upwards, and upwards, and upwards, and upwards. Hey! Look there. What do you see? Say arachnovilus.
Arachnoid.
Good. So step 6. It reaches the arachnoid villus. Does anyone remember what villi and arachnoid mean? Spider legs, right? All right, so what happened at the arachnoid villus? What is that trying to show me? What's happening at the arachnoid villus? That's right, it's leaving the subarachnoid space. The subarachnoid space is the blue. The CSF is leaving the subarachnoid space and entering this, which is outside the arachnoid space. So it drains from the arachnoid space, drains out. So CSF is going to go all the way down and around the outside of my brain and drain out. Into what? Into the blood. Someone tell me why I want the CSF to drain into my blood. Why would I want to do that? Make plasma, right? Came out of my blood, goes around my brain, then goes back in my blood again. Recycling the fluid. I'm going to start at my ventricles, go down, spread around. So when you're studying, do this kind of thing. That's what you're essentially going to do. That's the pathway to CSF. I'm going to leave the choroid plexi, go down and around my brain, and leak out the top. Make sense? I hope so. We're going to show a video on that now. So I know you love those so. Maybe, yes. Turn this on.
Cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, circulates freely through the ventricles of the brain, the central canal of the spinal cord, and the subarachnoid space.
Yep.
It is produced in each of the 4 ventricles by the choroid plexus, a structure that consists of specialized ependymal cells, their associated blood vessels, and connective tissues. The endothelial cells of blood vessels within the choroid plexus and ependymal cells are joined by tight junctions and collectively form the blood-CSF barrier, a portion of the blood-brain barrier.
Remember that from last term? We mentioned that you don't want everything in your blood in your CSF, in your CSF and CNS, right? That would kill you. My cheeseburgers end up in my brain, I die. So the ependymal cells have to regulate what comes in. So usually they take the fluid only. So you're removing plasma from your blood, putting it into the brain called CSF. But you want to get that plasma back, otherwise you'd basically dehydrate yourself. Right? So you're going to recycle that plasma after it's made a loop back to the brain. That's the goal. So you go down and around to get back.
The selective permeability of this barrier controls what molecules are able to reach the cells of the brain.
Go to mouse party if you want to know which ones.
We can trace the flow of CSF starting in the lateral ventricles.
Step 1.
From the lateral ventricles, CSF flows through the interventricular foramina to the 3rd ventricle.
Step 2.
From here, the CSF enters the cerebral aqueduct and travels to the 4th ventricle.
4.
Once in the 4th ventricle, the fluid enters the subarachnoid space around the brain and spinal cord by either passing through the 2 lateral apertures in the walls of the 4th ventricle or through the single median aperture located in the roof of the 4th ventricle.
5. That's the choice.
A portion of the CSF also enters the central canal of the spinal cord. Accumulations of arachnoid villi, called arachnoid granulations, project into a venous channel within the dura mater known as the superior sagittal sinus. CSF is recycled into the venous part of the bloodstream at the arachnoid granulations. The turnover rate for CSF, from its production at the choroid plexus to its reabsorption into the superior sagittal sinus, is approximately 0.4 milliliters per minute.
And you never have to know that. If you watch this animation with the yellow, you get the feel. It goes down my brain, then around the outside, back up. That's why I'm doing this weird sort of modern dance thing here. Right? It goes down and around and back out the top. Right? So it's going to start in the choroid plexi, and then fill up the middle of my brain in those balloons, and scroll down my spine, the subarachnoid space, and eventually end up back at the top of my brain, above the brain, to drain back in the blood. So that list there is thou shalt know that thou shalt. Make sense? Nod your heads blindly. Good.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put that to the test. We're going to get our lecture packet of pain. So get out your packet of pain and find page 11, which looks like this. This is the class. If you don't have your packet, buddy up with someone who does. We're not turning this in, it's just to learn.